Hey everyone, welcome to Scott's RPG Reviews. Let's see if I can adjust this camera here a little bit. There, that's pretty good. Probably need to get a camera set higher. We'll work on that. I haven't done a review in a while. I got a bunch of stuff in back here to review. I got one in just the other day that I thought was particularly interesting I wanted to talk about because I don't think it's getting a lot of press, which is the Electric State. And I'll put a picture of it and I'll put a link up as well in the comments. So it's the Electric State. So I want to talk about it, talk about what it is, how it's structured, what I liked about it, what some things I think they could have improved on. So the idea behind the Electric State is it's an alternative history RPG, kind of like Tales from the Loop, if you've played Tales from the Loop, or the Flood. I can't remember what the Flood one's called. There's a Flood one. Is set in the 1990s. Now, the idea behind the game is that starting in the 1960s, history changed. The first one is in the 1960s, a field of science called neuronics came out, which was basically the idea you could put these helmets on your head and have interfaces directly with your mind. This is a very cyberpunk-esque kind of feeling to it. But the idea is you have this field of neuronics. Now, as a symptom of this, along some other things, in 1975, you have a civil war inside the United States, which goes until 1984. By the way, this is a very U.S.-focused game. There isn't a lot of discussion. In fact, I don't think there's any discussion about, well, did this happen in Europe? If so, what happened? It's very U.S.-focused. So, in 1975, you have a civil war. In 1984, it ends. By 84, it ends, and the U.S. is broken apart into a whole bunch of different segments. And the one that we deal with in this game is called Pacifica, which is basically California becomes its own country. And everything happens in the 1990s, but an alternative 1990s where the U.S. is broken apart. And I think more importantly is it has a very post-apocalyptic feel to it that society is in a decline. Society is slowly kind of falling apart. That is the environment. Now, in terms of the game itself and its kind of feel to it is, this is a game where you're not classic dungeon crawling, and this is very important. This is not go out and find the big bad guy and defeat it. This is a game that's about adventure and exploration, which is, by the way, the types of games I tend to really like. In fact, my players, with the GM games I'm GMing, players say we much more prefer just going out and finding weird stuff and exploring it rather than going out and killing the bad guy. So be aware, this is a game that it's about exploration. And interestingly, when I read this and the way it's structured in terms of a series of journeys. Your group of players start in Los Angeles, they get in a car, and they go some direction, and they encounter things. It really reminded me a lot of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and the opening sections of it in particular. So it is a RPG that is focused on exploration and just discovering interesting stuff. Are there threats? Sure. Is there potential of threat? Sure. Is there combat? Sure. But is that what the point of the game is? If you're looking for a hack and slash game set in an alternative universe, this is probably not the game for you. I'd look at something else. So, that is the Electric State in terms of its structure. Now let's talk about the game itself, the book. There's one book out right now. I want to talk about the book, its structure, what I like about it, what I don't like about it. Starts with the very standard opening. Well, what's an RPG? What's this universe like? All that kind of stuff. It talks about the concept of journeying. And this is very important because this is a little bit different from the way a lot of RPGs run. The idea behind here is you're going to go on a journey from typically Los Angeles to some other location. You're going to take a car and you're going to drive, and you're going to encounter things along the way. It's a road trip game in a kind of a weird alternative history post-apocalyptic universe. It talks about dice rolling and principles behind the game. So that's chapter 1. Pretty straightforward. Chapter 2 is a history of the state of Pacifica in this particular environment. So it talks about what happened, talks about neuronics, it talks about corporations. There is a section on other nations and what happened there. Very, very short, though. It's about 5 pages on other nations. So it's got a quick history section. The nice thing is it's only about 30 pages long. I like that. Sometimes we get into some RPGs and the history is so long. The ones I'm thinking of in particular are Dune and Star Trek. Dune. Oh, they're both by Modiphius, where the history is really, really long. Even Blade Runner in Free League Publishing's environment is a pretty long history. Important, but you have a lot less history here to read. Much more approachable. Then it talks about character creation. It's Year Zero engine modified using archetypes. So you have a different archetype you can use and how it works. It talks about stats and gears. The one thing that is important in this one is your vehicle is almost its own character because you're traveling on a road trip. So you want to be aware of your vehicle. There's about 3 pages devoted to your vehicle and how it works in game. Got a section on combat and neuronics. It's about 20 through 30 pages long. Goes through the standard, pretty standard Year Zero engine stuff. You have close combat and ranged combat. It shows how damage works. You have hope, which is kind of like stress from Blade Runner, where you can lose hope as well, in addition to just regular damage. So those are the first 4 chapters. Now, from there we then go into the idea of creating adventures. And remember, adventures here are called journeys. They're kind of road trips. And they give you a general format of how these work. And these journeys are organized through a series of stops. And stops are points of interest where something is going to happen. So you go, okay, I started in LA, and then I go to Barstow, and then there's something in Barstow that happens. And then I go to Palm Springs, and there's something happens there. And then I go to Joshua Tree. And you go out west, and you encounter more and more stuff, as an example. So it talks about the journey and the journey structure. Then it talks about types of threats. You don't just have bad guys you're fighting. You can have technical threats. You can have environmental threats. You can have personal stuff that's going on as well. So you got a whole bunch of sections on threats. And then they get into a example adventure called Into the Dust with 3 stops. My saying is it's relatively short. 3 stops and you're done. And the last section, which is about another 15 or 20 pages, is how to play this as a solo game. And I don't know how I feel about that, because I kind of want to, when you talk about a game where discovery and finding out stuff is part of the game, I'm not sure how well solo would work. It's there. It does have a structure for it. Is it something I'm particularly interested in? No, I think that this works much better with a GM that's building this really cool set of stuff or grabbing pre-existing content. So that is it. So the total book is about, I'll tell you how long it is, 220 pages long. It's got a example character sheet. It's got some pre-gens. You know what, interestingly, I hadn't noticed this. It has pre-gen characters built in. Oh, and it does have a blank character sheet. Character sheets are short. It also has a character sheet for the vehicle as well. There's all sorts of interesting things, like you pick a favorite song. You've got a journey and threat, so on and stuff like that. So, that's the book. Now let's talk about the RPG. I like it's a Year Zero engine. I'm slowly liking the Blade Runner Year Zero engine better than the standard Year Zero engine, but it's standard Year Zero engine, and so just be aware of that. I've got other stuff on Year Zero engine. It's a dice pool, 6-sided dice pools, as opposed to the Blade Runner, which is multiples. So that is the Year Zero engine. It's a really interesting game. I really like the fact it's exploration. The one thing I will say is what I had wished, and maybe they'll do this, so I think about the other Free League publishing stuff. Forbidden Lands, Dragonbane, Blade Runner, Alien, all of those have starter sets, which give you, particularly the Blade Runner one is one of my personal favorites, gives you a whole bunch of stuff in addition to a kind of a core rulebook. I kind of wish they had done this, because this is a game that's about exploration and discovering stuff. That's its whole point. And you've got the book, which has the stuff in it, but it doesn't have a cool set of props. It would have been nice if a starter set had come and it's got a built-in, it's got a basic set of rules, pre-gen characters, and then an adventure or journey with a whole bunch of pictures and photographs and maybe newspapers and other stuff to go to kind of emphasize this exploration idea. That is the So I kind of wish maybe they will come out with a starter set. this is a relatively new game. It's getting a fair amount of attention, not a ton, but it's definitely something I'm going to get to the table, and that's it. So be sure to check it out. Free League Publishing's Electric State, available at various locations, your local game store, Amazon, and DriveThru RPG, and I believe they have an PDF version as well. Everyone have a good day, and we'll see you next week.